movement. And today we will deconstruct the notion that defends the argument that says that the Europeans had no knowledge of what was going on and how our people were being killed by diseases. It is our position in the Mexica movement that these attacks of biological warfare were intentional. And we have taken that position for the last 30 years, thanks to the research and scholarly work of Olin Tezcatlipoca. So this quarter, I'm a history major and I am choosing to write about smallpox and other diseases. And my argument is that, yes, they indeed were used intentionally against the people known as Western Hemisphere. So to begin, I'm just going to share, I'm trying to make this as brief as possible because there's so much information to share with you. To start off with, let's debunk the actual conventional, the mainstream interpretation of what happened here. Basically, to represent that position is David Cook. David Cook says that Spaniards, it's not that they're that violent. It wasn't that their violence killed millions and millions of Mexica people or other indigenous people. It was actually disease. Diseases which they had no idea, that which they had no control over, that's the biggest aspect and the biggest factor behind the killings of indigenous people. Furthermore, he says that this legend was exaggerated by Northern Europeans, so the animosity between the Southern and Northern Europeans. So basically saying that the Black legend was used to justify the demonization of Southern Europeans. So that is the mainstream view. This is replicated in history textbooks today. This is the narrative that is usually being taught and accepted. Of course, we go to the other side of the story, which is American Holocaust by David E. Stannard. David E. Stannard states that the whole case of what happened, the actions, the list of actions that were committed against the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere constitute genocide. He emphasizes that it was genocide. He's perhaps the first historian to be completely confront the treatment of our people and actually categorizes it as genocide. However, as far as saying and stating that they use diseases intentionally, he does not say that outright, but he is inferring to it based on the fact that he's making the argument that what happened to our ancestors is genocide. And a genocide is a combination of attacks, a combination of intentions that are behind and have the agenda of the ultimate destruction of a people. So he does not say it was intentional. At the very beginning, and this we're talking about the 16th century, we're talking about the Spaniards. He doesn't really say it. Of course, there is no smoking gun up until the late 1700s, early 1800s, which we will get to. So that is the second argument. Then we have another author, Ronald Wright, in Stolen Continents. On here, he doesn't really get too much into the biological warfare, the beginning invasion of our land, but he does say that it was a military tactic that was used against the native Nicantlaca military officers. He's basically saying that coincidentally, it is the generals, it is the officers, it is a high-ranking warriors who get infected. And he's basically inferring that what a coincidence that you're saying you have no control over these diseases, but why is it that the leaders of these nations are the first ones that are being killed by these diseases? So that's a very powerful argument. And we have other books such as this one, Cherokee Medicine, Colonial Germs, and Indigenous Nations Fight Against Smallpox. So this book is basically talking about how our people actually tried to combat it. They tried to use medicines. They tried to use a bunch of our own medicines to fight this disease, to try to protect ourselves against these germs. But it was of no use because, again, we had never been exposed to that. So that's that argument. And then we have probably, this is representing the 18th century with Pax Americana. This is by Elizabeth Fenn, which basically she gathers that biological warfare was indeed used, and this is in the late 1700s, through the American War, the American Indian War, and the American Independence War. So she does actually provide a lot of primary sources that talk about how these generals and these British, whether they're British or American, they wrote down that they actually wanted smallpox to spread and have a desired effect. The desired effect is that our people will be dead. So that way they have less Indians to fight in the war. So this is a very powerful book. And again, this is a smoking gun. This is where we can see an actual European saying, okay, yes, I want to spread smallpox through blankets. I hope that these Indians die. So that is where we see the smoking gun. The problem is that we don't have a smoking gun prior to that. So what we have to understand is we have to realize that a lot of the writings that the Spaniards themselves, a lot of the documentation that they did upon invading our lands, those writings were destroyed. In the law of 1577, the king of Spain, he actually called for the prohibition of indigenous documents or knowledge. And we can only imagine how many documents he called to be destroyed. And among that, it would have been the Florentine Codex, which those of you who know today, Fray Bernardino de Sahagún, the only reason we have a copy of that was because he sent a copy to France as he was writing this so-called very first ethnography of our people. So that is the only way that we have more extended information on our Mexica civilization. So, and it's, again, we don't have a smoking gun, but yet we can say that about the Jewish Holocaust. Hitler never wrote down, kill all the Jews, right? And so based on his actions and his rhetoric and his demeanor and all the concentration camps and all these campaigns, one can infer that he wanted to kill all the Jews, right? So that's what we're talking about with our case is, yeah, we don't have a Spaniard Cortez in his letter saying, oh yeah, I'm going to kill all these Aztecs with smallpox. No, of course not. But what we do have is a pattern of actions that went along, starting from the Canary Islands up until all the way down to even Hawaii recently, and the overthrow of the Hawaiian queen. And so what we have to look at is first of all, Europeans, they knew about biological warfare. They had been using biological warfare in Europe. So for them to get here and invade our lands and all of a sudden start seeing the rapid spread of disease, and for them to pretend now to say, oh, they didn't know about it. It's bullshit, because they knew, they had an idea of what biological warfare, they had been using it against each other in Europe. Number two, we have to follow the thread of consistency. The thread of consistency is, like we have Ronald Wright saying, it was a military tactic. Killing the actual rulers, the leaders of these nations through diseases was very tactical. They didn't kill them with violence, or they didn't know. It's like, what a coincidence. You're saying that you have no knowledge of this, but what a coincidence that all of the leaders are being killed by this disease. So we have to gather that information. We have to gather the information that when Cortez was taking over Tenochtitlan on the final night of so-called conquest, as soon as he got there, he knew that there was famine, he knew that there was destruction, and he knew that the disease had already had an outbreak in Tenochtitlan. So what does he do? He completely closes it down. He cuts off the water supply, he cuts off any food supply going in. And so he knew these people are dying of smallpox. Let's shut them in there and let's kill them all. They're all going to die anyway. Let's not give them anything. So along with the smallpox, you have this starvation attack against the people. And so anyways, I mean, that's some of the points that I'm going to be talking about. There's a lot more. All this information, again, it's not that I did it myself. This is information that has been shared with me through Only Tezcatlipoca. I have been discussing this with my professors. There's so much knowledge that we have to read. There's so many things that we have to read to make this case, because we are given an interpretation of a non-colonized, non-European people, and we are having to connect between all of these primary sources and all of these historians that have been arguing this, and let's Let's follow the consistency. Let's follow that pattern. Let's give it an actual historical perspective. Let's zoom out and see how that has happened throughout our whole continent since 1492. So again, that's a video that I wanted to do to share with you guys some of the work that I've been doing. I'm really excited about this paper. It should be done hopefully like in the next month or so. Gracias Mati for watching. Stay tuned for much more videos. Stay decolonized. Stay awake. Stay beautiful. Timishiga.